The file names of the files within a disk group, the location of disk group data file data extents. A redo log that records information about automatically changing data blocks. What is the Oracle ASM filter driver? Oracle ASM filter driver is a new feature in Oracle Database C release. As an abbreviation, this is called Oracle ASMFD, which happens to be a kernel module. This kernel module is included in the path of the I/O path of Oracle ASM disks. This module is included to protect the underlying ASM disks from unnecessary, typically non-Oracle rights-related I/O operations, which in turn protects disks from being corrupt. What is the ASM power_limit? This is the parameter that controls the number of allocation units the ASM instance will try to rebalance at any given time. In ASM versions less than, the default value is, however, it has been changed to unlimited in later versions. What is a rolling upgrade? A patch is considered rolling if it can be applied to the cluster binaries without having to shut down the database in a RAC environment. All nodes in the cluster are patched in a rolling manner, one by one, with only the node which is being patched unavailable while all other instances open. How does ASM provide redundancy? When you create a disk group, you specify an ASM disk group type based on one of the following three redundancy levels. Normal four-way mirroring. When ASM allocates an extent for a normal redundancy file, ASM allocates a primary copy and a secondary copy. ASM chooses the disk on which to store the secondary copy in a different failure group other than the primary copy. High four-way mirroring. In this case, the extent is mirrored across disks. External to not use ASM mirroring. This is used if you are using third-party redundancy mechanisms like RAID, storage arrays. Can we change the redundancy for disk group after its creation? No, we cannot modify the redundancy for disk group once it has been created. To alter it, we will be required to create a new disk group and move the files to it. This can also be done by restoring the full backup on the new disk group. Does the ASM instance automatically rebalances and takes care of hotspots? No. This is a myth, and ASM does not do it. It will initiate automatic rebalance only when a new disk is added to disk group or we drop a disk from the existing disk group. What is ASMlib? ASMlib is the support library for the ASM. ASMlib allows an Oracle database using ASM more efficient and capable access to disk groups. The purpose of ASMlib is to provide an alternative interface to identify and access blocked devices. Additionally, the ASMlib API enables storage and operating system vendors to supply extended storage-related features. What is the sysasm role? Starting from Oracle G, the sysasm role can be used to administer the ASM instances. You can continue using the DBA role to connect to ASM, but it will generate the following warning messages at the time of startup/shutdown, create disk group /add a disk, etc. Alert entry. Warning, deprecated privilege SYSDBA for command startup. Advanced level. What is CFED? CFED is a utility that can be used to view the ASM disk information. The syntax for using it is CFED read device name. ASM and cluster synchronization service. An ASM storage system requires the use of an additional specialized database instance called ASM, which will actually manage the storage for a set of Oracle databases. In order to use ASM storage for your Oracle databases, you must first ensure that you have Oracle's Cluster Synchronization Service, CSS, running on your databases. CSS is responsible for synchronizing ASM instances and your database instances, and it is installed as part of your Oracle software. CSS also synchronizes recovery from an ASM instance failure. You can find out if the CSS service is running by using the following command. What processes does the rebalancing? RBAL, ARBN. How to find out the databases which are using the ASM instance? ASMCMD LSCT. SQL select DB_name from $ASM_client. What are the different types of striping in ASM and their differences? Fine-grained striping. Coarse-grained striping. What is the best LUN size for ASM? There is no best size. In most cases, the storage team will dictate to you based on their standardized LUN size. The ASM administrator merely has to communicate the ASM best practices and application characteristics to storage folks. A. Need equally sized / performance LUNs. B. Minimum of LUNs. C. The capacity requirement. D. The workload characteristic, random art / W, sequential art / W, and any response time SLA. Can my RDBMS and ASM instances run different versions? Yes. ASM can be at a higher version or at a lower version than its client databases. There are two components of compatibility. A. Software compatibility. B. Disk group compatibility attributes. C. Compatible.asm. D. Compatible.rdbms. This is a disk group level change and not an instance level change, no rolling upgrade here. How do I back up my ASM instance? There is no backup for ASM instance as ASM has no files to backup. Unlike the database, ASM does require a control file type structure or any other external metadata to bootstrap itself. All the data ASM needs to start up is on disk structures, disk headers, and other disk group metadata. How does ASM work with multipathing software? Multipathing software is at a layer lower than ASM and thus is transparent. You may need to adjust ASM_disk string to specify only the path to the multipathing pseudo devices. Multipathing tools provide the following benefits. A. It provides a single block device interface for a multipathed LUN. B. It detects any component failures in the I/O path, example fabric port, channel adapter, or HBA. C. When a loss of path occurs, ensure that I/OS are rerouted to the available paths, with no process disruption. D. Reconfigure the multipath automatically when events occur. E. Ensure that failed paths get revalidated as soon as possible and provide auto-failback. What are the advantages of ASM in Oracle? A. Provides automatic load balancing over all the available disks, thus reducing hotspots in the file system. B. Prevents fragmentation of disks, so you don't need to manually relocate data to tune I/O performance. C. Adding disks is straightforward. ASM automatically performs online disk reorganization when you add or remove storage. D. Uses redundancy features available in intelligent storage arrays. E. The storage system can store all types of database files. F. Using disk group makes configuration easier, as files are placed into disk groups. G. ASM provides stripping and mirroring. H. ASM and non-ASM Oracle files can coexist. What is a disk group? A disk group consists of multiple disks and is the fundamental object that ASM manages. Each disk group contains the metadata that is required for the management of space in the disk group. The ASM instance manages the metadata about the files in a disk group in the same way that a file system manages metadata about its files. However, the vast majority of I/O operations do not pass through the ASM instance. In a moment we will look at how file I/O works with respect to the ASM instance. Explain the advantages of using ASM. It spreads I/O across the disk uniformly. Performs automatic rebalance upon disk addition and deletion. Capable of leveraging multipath layer. Mirroring and striping capability. Tightly coupled with OMF. Reduces administration complexity. Overcomes file size limitation. 3. How ASM mirroring works? Explain different RAID levels. RAID provides striping capability. RAID 1 provides mirroring capability. RAID plus 1, first striping, then mirrored. RAID 1 plus, first mirroring then striping, mostly used for Oracle database. RAID with additional parity. RAID with additional parity. How ASM interacts with database. First time, when RDBMS instance tries to access an ASM file, it needs to establish a local ASM connection. ASMB process contacts CSS using disk group names and gets the connection string. Using that connection string, bequeath connection is established between ASM and RDBMS instance. The RDBMS authenticates itself to the ASM instance via operating system (OS) authentication by connecting as SIS-DBA. This initial connection between the ASM instance and the RDBMS instance is known as the umbilicus, and remains active as long as the RDBMS instance has any ASM files open. ASMB is the RDBMS side process, and UFG, umbilicus foreground process, is the ASM side process. Both communicate through this umbilicus. When ASM instance opens a data file, ASM ships the file's extent map to RDBMS instance, where it is stored in SGA. By using that extent map, RDBMS can do I/O on the ASM files directly without going through ASM instance. Can I keep disks of different sizes in a disk group? Though we can keep different size disks in a disk group, the extent distribution will be unbalanced. And it will induce unbalanced I/O across the disk group. Oracle always recommends to use disks of same size in a disk group. What is ASM power limit? ASM_power_limit parameter controlled the throughput and speed of the rebalance operation. In 12C, the values varies from 1 to 12. Value of will disable the automatic rebalance operation. If ASM_power_limit is 1, then 1 ARBN processes will be created to do the rebalance job. But please note, higher value of ASM_power_limit can cause more CPU load. So always use a balanced value and try to do these in non-peak hours. What are some important ASM background processes? RBAL, this opens all the devices upon discovery and coordinate the rebalance operation. ARBN, these are the slave processes that do the rebalance operation. DBWR, writes ASM instance metadata changes in SGA buffer to disk. LGWR, it manages the active change directory and flushes the ACD change records to disk. PMON, this manages process and process death. GMON, this manages disk-level activities like disk drop/add/offline/online. Mark allocation unit, process coordinates the updates to the staleness registry. Ping, monitors network latency. There is a control_file parameter for ASM instance. If I delete that, what will happen? In some version of ASM, there will a control_file for ASM_instance. It is a dummy control_file, which is of no use. It is meaningless. However, in latest version, 1C, this parameter is not available. 11. How can I improve the I/O performance between database instance and ASM instance? ASM instance is not in the I/O path. Database perform I/O directly with ASM disks. It doesn't go through ASM instance. I.e. there is no relation between database instance and ASM instance in terms of I/O. Database instance only get the ASM extent map information, ASM metadata, from ASM instance. 12. What is the minimum number of ASM disk groups we should have? 2 disk groups. 13. What are the different header status of ASM disks? Candidate means disk is available and can be added to disk group, usually in Solaris Spark, PUX. Provisioned, same as candidate disk, but disk was provisioned using asmlib. Usually in Linux. Member means disk is already part of a disk group. Former mean disk was formerly part of a disk group but currently not part of any disk group. Explain different redundancy types of ASM disk groups. The redundancy levels are: external redundancy. Oracle ASM does not provide mirroring redundancy and relies on the storage system to provide RAID functionality.